everybody. Welcome to the Jim Masters Show, Entertainment Lifestyle Celebrity Talk Show series. Jim Masters here, reporting for duty in the host chair right here in the New York area in the United States. Hope your day is going well. Thanks so much for making us a part of your day as we continue to have good times together and spectacular guests who come in from all celebrity levels, backgrounds, and all walks of life. And we've got a very special guest joining us right now. Our next guest and my special guest is award-winning author John David Bethel. Special exclusive guest interview here. And John has penned lots of incredible books. Here are some of them as well. Yeah, and we're going to tell you how you can add all of these to your collection. David is really amazing. He's a prolific award-winning writer, author, novelist, and there's a new one out too that we're going to talk about in just a second, and that is called this right here, Mapping the Night. It's a thriller from the author of Wretched and Hotel Hell. David is with us, coming to us actually from Washington, D.C. right now. He's made his home in Florida, in the Miami area, but loves D.C. as well. So he's coming to us from D.C. at the time of this broadcast, and we're excited about that. I want to tell you a little bit about this extraordinary individual and his amazing background. He was actually born in Palo Alto, California, and he was a speechwriter to Cabinet Secretaries at the Departments of Commerce and Education during the Bush 41 and 43 administrations. He also served as press secretary, speechwriter to members of the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives. And additionally, David worked as a communications strategist for a number of national and international public relations firms, including Burson, Marsteller, and Cohn and Wolfe. Really amazing stuff. He was born the son of Paul D. Bethel, a Foreign Service Office, as well, U.S. Department of State. He lived in various cities in Germany and Japan and Havana, Cuba between 1950 and 1960. Graduated from Miami Edison High School in Miami, Florida, where he excelled in sports as well as academic pursuits. And he was actually selected for the Miami News All-Star football team. And he was a scholar athlete as well, and just really dug in deep. And he's got an incredible professional career, as I mentioned. He began his governmental political career in 1972 as a staff member of the Legacy of Parks program, the executive president, and was a press advance officer, wrote speeches for the administration officials, or served as surrogates for President Nixon during Legacy of Parks ceremonies, and dedicating excess federal properties to state and local governments. 73, joined the staff of Congressman Burt Talcott as press secretary, moved to the staff of Paul Laxalt. In 75, served as press secretary and speechwriter. And then he helped actually Laxalt create or craft the speech the senator used to nominate then Governor Ronald Reagan as the Republican candidate for president in 1976. And also wrote the lead article for the publication celebrating the second inauguration of President Ronald Reagan, We the People, an American Celebration. It's really extraordinary. He returned to Washington, served again as executive assistant to Darrell Trent, the deputy secretary of the U.S. Department of Transportation, later joined the staff as the assistant secretary of the department's Office of Policy and International Affairs, to serve as the chief speechwriter for the assistant secretary and senior staff members. Then he moved in 89 to the U.S. Department of Education, where he headed the Office of Speechwriting for the Secretary of Education. Really amazing. Gaming Association, and lots more. It's extraordinary. Again, he's got this wonderful literary career, and he's been celebrating it again in style with all of these incredible books. He's penned fiction and nonfiction. And again, this newest, Mapping the Night, we're going to talk about this and what it's all about. An extraordinary life he's lived and continues to live, an extraordinary person who has been really involved in so many incredible things that have actually made a positive difference in our world, in our country, and he's given back, and he does in grand style with his novels. So it's my honor and pleasure today on this episode of JMS, the Jim Masters Show, to welcome John David Bethel, David, to our show as a very special guest. David, welcome to the Jim Masters Show. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I'm humbled by that introduction. I've forgotten some of that stuff. It's been so long.
You know, that's the short abbreviated list of this extraordinary career that you've had. And I'm blown away by it. And thank you again for the commitment and the service, the honorable service that you've given and continue to give to our blessed land here. What first inspired you to want to get into that line of work anyway? Of course, I know within the family it was sort of evident, but when did you decide, and what inspired you to want to do work that really serves the greater good?
Well, I spent a summer in Washington working as an intern for the senator from Florida at the time. This was after I graduated and before I was supposed to go to law school. And I enjoyed writing. I've always been a writer, so to speak. I did well in college in creative writing and that sort of thing. And when I went to Washington, I discovered that the people there, the office holders, they need people who can write speeches, write floor statements, write testimony before Congress, and that sort of thing. So skipped law school, got a job on the House side of Congress with a representative there. This was after my service in the Nixon administration. And went from there. I mean, it just, like most things that people do, you kind of fall into stuff as much as anything else. And one thing led to another. And wherever I went, I found ways to use my writing talents. And as you noted, wrote speeches for a lot of people, and that's how it got started. And it was that summer in Washington that got me interested in politics. Although, again, as you mentioned, my dad was in government service, in the Foreign Service, so I knew something about politics and about government service. So, it all kind of came together.
It all kind of came together. When did you want to do what you do so beautifully, which is write these incredible works, these novels, fiction and nonfiction? When did that part of your world, because you're a prolific speechwriter, you've written all these papers, you're a wordsmith, and I love that. I like to be a wordsmith myself and a conversationalist. When did you decide to then embark in that area?
Well, I've always had an interest in creative writing. Obviously, when I was earning a living as a professional, I had to concentrate on that. But you build up these stories in your mind, so to speak. And after I decided to leave my profession, to retire, I went back to some of these stories that I had pigeonholed, so to speak, and started writing. I always wanted to write. I had an opportunity when I retired to try my hand at creative writing. And to be honest, I sat down and started writing. I had no real idea that I could write a novel. But as with most of my writing, my process is a bit different, I think, than some people's. I begin with the kernel of an idea and go from there. I have no idea where I'm going when I start to write. Every time, you sit down, you go from paragraph to paragraph, from idea to idea. Where would your characters go if they're put in such and such a situation? And that's how I write. So to answer your question, after I retired, I had this idea pigeonholed for my first novel called Evil Town. How would the police, the Metropolitan Police in Washington and the Capitol Hill Police handle it if a a senator's wife, in this case, a representative's wife, was murdered. Where would we go from there? And I sat down, I just started writing. And at the end of 6 months, I had a novel.
Isn't that incredible? What was that feeling like? And here you have a novel and it's the first one. It's a feeling of accomplishment, but it's a feather in the cap. What was that like, the writing process? And what was the feeling like when it was accomplished out there and people started purchasing it, but then responding to it? And I'm sure you've gotten a lot of feedback as well that spurs you on to want to write more. It must have been an incredible feeling right out of the gate in the beginning.
Absolutely. Again, you sit down, you spend 6 months, 4 to 5 hours a day, sitting in front of a computer screen. And again, this is one of the hardest things about being a writer. It's the discipline involved in sitting down and actually doing the writing. A lot of people have said, I have a novel in me. And the answer is, well, maybe, but unless you can sit down in front of a keyboard and spend 4 or 5 hours a day over a course of 6 months, dedicating yourself to writing it and just being not allowing yourself to be diverted by anything else, you're not going to be able to write a book. And that was probably the most difficult thing. So to answer your question, by the time I got to the end and I decided I was at the end of the novel, and found an agent and got it actually published, yeah, it's a wonderful feeling, because as I said, when I sat down, I didn't really think that I was going to finish a novel. I just was going to write because I enjoyed writing. And so to actually put it all together and get something published, and then it's gotten pretty good. It got pretty good reviews at the time, even from some congressmen on the Hill who read it. So yeah, it's a good feeling. And yes, it does spur you on to go, if it had actually been a bomb and people said, man, you can't put sentences together, I imagine I would have quit. But yeah, I was encouraged to go on. And here I am 10 novels later, sitting in front of it, talking to you.
That's incredible. I tell you, 10 novels later, that's extraordinary. Kudos to you. The writing process is quite interesting. And I've chatted with a lot of writers over the years, and I've done a lot of writing myself, short stories, newspapers, things of that nature, magazine. And what do you find in your process? And again, I guess it depends on the individual project. I've heard some varying and some fascinating answers from people when I ask them about their writing process, as far as what is the more difficult, getting started, putting those first few words on paper and getting the engine going, or knowing when to wrap it, cap it, finish it, put the last period on the last sentence, maybe do some rewrites, but then be comfortable enough to then release it to the world. Or, and this one, actually, one of the guests at one time, maybe a year ago, who had published a book, said something fascinating. They said, you know what, actually, Jim, not the beginning for me, not the end for me, because I knew what the beginning was, and I knew how I wanted to end the book. And I think it was their memoir. It was the middle for them, knowing how to join the beginning and the ending, and marrying those, blending those two together and having the middle. How about for you? Is it the beginning, the middle, the end, the process?
Well, let's take my current novel, Mapping the Night. As I said, my process is a little different, I think, from a lot of writers. I read an article in the New York Times about a murder of a young woman. And what happened was the police went and did a welfare check of this young woman who had not been seen around the building for 3 or 4 days. She had a young son who had not gone to school. And so the neighbors called the police. They came and they investigated, and they found her body sitting in bed, and her young son was sitting next to her with ice and trying to revive her with ice. Of course, this is a haunting scene. I mean, for me, it was, to just visualize this young kid who told the police, he turned around when they walked in. He says, "You've got to help my mom. I can't make her wake up." And this is what she always did for me. She put ice on my head when I had a fever, when I got sick, and I got well, but it's not working. You've got to help me. this was a haunting scene for me. I couldn't get it out of my head. So I sat down at the computer and I started writing. But unlike the person you talked to, I didn't know where it was going to end. All I know when I sit down and start writing is I have the first inkling, the first chapter, if you will, of the novel, the first scene, and that's it. And I just go from there. So the toughest thing for me is not sitting down, because I have this idea that's playing in my head that I have to get, that I have to put on paper or on the screen, if you will. And the toughest thing is sitting down every day and doing it, no matter what. Someone once said, a writer writes. If you want to be a writer, then you've got to sit down and you've got to write. Having said that, because I've got this story in my head that I feel like I have to get down on the screen, it's not tough for me to sit down every day and do it because I want to do it. It's something that I have to do, that I'm compelled to do to finish up. So, but the toughest thing, I think, is when you get to the end after you have your first draft, you have to go back. You have to rewrite everything, because obviously when you just spill it out onto the page, it's not perfect. It's very imperfect. And you have to go back and grammar, spelling, and then you realize, oh my God, there's a plot hole here. How did so-and-so get from this place to that place? I haven't tied that together. I'm writing about in New York, the current novel, Mapping the Night, is set in New York. So I had to do a lot of research on New York. And one of the characters in the novel has a condition called eczardoma pigmentosa, which means that he cannot go out during the day. He's allergic to light. So he can only go out at night, and he can only live in the dark. So I had to do research on that as well. So you kind of throw all that together and you put it in a plot. And New York City was a character in the novel. So I had to be sure that everything I was writing about New York City at night was correct. And then you had the villain in this is a serial killer. So I had to make sure I had all my information on that, that deviant personality. Was it right? Am I putting it on the paper right? So I had to consult with a lot of FBI manuals on this kind of deviancy, and some psychological manuals as well. So the toughest thing is putting all that together and getting to the end. And as your friend said, knowing when you're at the end, when you've finally polished it, it's never going to be perfect. You're never going to have the perfect novel, but you have to decide at some point, okay, that's it. That's all I can do. Or else you'll sit there for the rest of your life, typing and trying to get it perfect.
Exactly. The editing process, whether it's the written word or it's video or audio, can be an arduous process. I've been in many an editing bay, editing video, editing audio, editing just writing. And you can over edit to the point where the soul, the heart of it is gone. There's like nothing left to it. So it's an art form to know when to leave it alone and let it just be its thing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very important. You have to have that, I don't know if it's a sixth sense or whatever, but you have to know when enough is enough.
Exactly. It kind of works that way in all aspects of life, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. But it's one of the, I'm often asked by people, I want to be a writer. What are the elements that you think are most important? And I've already mentioned one, have to be very disciplined in order to sit down every day and do it. The other thing is, if you're writing for anybody other than yourself, you're going to be in trouble, because you're not going to write the great American novel. You're not going to write a New York Times bestseller. You're not going to get it turned into a movie, and you're not going to be walking down the red carpet. But you have to be confident enough in yourself and you have to want to write enough to just go ahead and do it. And then we've just talked about the other thing, and that is knowing when you're at the end of the process. That's very difficult. And maybe the most important thing, when you mix it all together, is you have to be able to accept rejection. I mean, I have enough rejection notices to paper my entire house. If you're not, if your ego is so fragile that you can't handle that, then you're not going to be much of a writer, because you're going to get a lot of that.
Yes, absolutely right. You've also had this very interesting fascination and a long fascination with crime and the darker recesses of the criminal mind, right? Tell us about that.
Well, it's interesting. It started, well, initially when I started writing, I was writing all political thrillers because that's what I knew, and they always say write what you know. Then I got a call one day from somebody who had read one of my novels. We were living in Miami at the time, and he was living in Miami at the time. He called me up. He says, I'm a private investigator. I have a case that I think could be turned into a true crime novel. A true crime book. So I'd like to talk to you about it. So I met with him, and he was had served as a private investigator for a man who was kidnapped, tortured, and extorted he was an entrepreneur. He was taken to a warehouse in part of Miami, and tortured and extorted. His money was extorted from him, and it was a horrible process for him. He was there for a month. This was before cell phones and all the rest of it. So they tortured him. They made him sign back his checks. They made him sign over the deed of his house. These guys ended up living in his house. Then they tried to kill him. He survived a situation where they drove his car into a telephone pole, and the car blew up because they put butane canisters in the back of the car. He fell out as they were driving away. They saw him fall out. They turned around. They ran him over. Fortunately, he fell between the wheels of the car, and he wasn't killed. He doesn't remember any of this because they had him pumped up on horse tranquilizers and alcohol. But later on, when he woke up in the hospital and went to report this to the police didn't believe him because he was Argentinian. He was from Latin America. This was the time of the cocaine cowboys. They just dismissed it as another drug dealer. They were having internecine fights back then, warfare of their own. So they dismissed it. Well, the victim, Mark Schiller is his name. He ended up calling his lawyer, who called Ed Du Bois, the private investigator who called me. And Ed began to look into the situation. And initially he said, it's such a fantastic story. A guy getting kidnapped, 30 days, tortured. They actually put masking tape around half of his face so that he couldn't see. His face ended up melting. And it took years for his face to reshape itself. Long story short, the story was being made into a movie that Ed was the private investigator, Ed Du Bois, was serving as a consultant on, and they were turning it into a black comedy. And he got upset, and he says, "No, this can't stand, because they're making an idiot out of the guy who was the victim in this whole thing in order to justify the blackness of the comedy. They were making him into a kind of a sleazy character." So that's why, long story, that's why he called me. So, but he said he wanted it done in 6 months because the movie was coming out in 6 months. Well, I couldn't do it in 6 months. Nobody could do it in 6 months, get it written, edited, published, and everything else. So I asked him, Ed and the victim, Mark Schiller, whose journal I had. He prepared a journal right after he got out of the hospital. And I put it all together, and I said, "Would you guys mind if I turned this into a novel?" So, hence Blood Moon, which was the name of the novel, which is later, I think, retitled Hotel Hell by another publisher who picked up the book from the first publisher. Anyway, so in the process of working with Ed, he told me that he was a consultant on a case of a serial killer in Key West. And he gave me the files for the serial case. I became fascinated by the whole serial killer, the deviancy, the psychological deviancy, and everything else. So I started studying that, and I turned that into a couple of books. Unheard of, moving back to the current novel, Night is a little different than that because it's more of a character study. But Wretched, Unheard of, and Holding Back the Dark are all focused on that deviancy. It was just something that fascinated me because I'd read crime novels, and it's always just the facts, ma'am. Who, what, why, where, but the why was always lost. It seems to me in the novels. I mean, in the true crime books, they tell you who did it and they theorize on why they did it, but the real why, the internalization of going inside the thinking process of these people was what fascinated me, and that's what I decided to focus a couple of my novels on.
Well, it really fascinates me too, as far as what makes people tick. Why do they do what they do? Why do they say what they say? What motivates people? Sort of the psychological side of humanity and trying to figure it all out. Sometimes, see, you get to work it out through writing these fabulous tales. Other times it's hard because you're never going to know why somebody was motivated to say this, do this, act this way, or what have you. So you sort of just, you're perplexed by it all, but you can create these wonderful stories that are very engaging. It draws people in. Is there a is there a reader in mind? Do you cater to a certain kind of reader, or is it really anybody that picks up one of these books, they're going to be immersed by it? And, you can't put it down, obviously, these are page turners, but do you have the reader in mind, or you're just writing it as you're writing it and then the rest will follow?
Yeah, I have myself in mind as a reader. As I said, I write to be entertained. I do not have a whole process where I outline things and I have backstories for my characters. Many writers do that. They outline it from the first page to the end. They have backstories for each of their characters, so they know their character really well, and when they put them in the novel, they know how they're going to react to things. I do it kind of by the seat of my pants, and if I'm writing and I'm entertained, I figure the reader is going to be entertained as well. So I guess the answer to your question is I write for myself.
Which is terrific. And then again, people will find it relatable. They can attach to it. And this the latest one, congratulations. How long did it take to actually write it?
All my novels take me from 4 to 6 months. And the difference between 4 months and 6 months is there are times in life when you do get sidetracked and you can't help it. And it takes a little longer, but 4 to 6 months, never less than 4 months and never much longer than 6 months.
And you pull oftentimes from really your own inspirations, right? And your own opportunities to experience life, inspired by real characters and events. Many have taken, place in your own colorful life and politics. And of course, that of your dad, the globe-trotting Foreign Service officer with the U.S. State Department, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. That's where my writing career, I guess, got started, because when I was a youngster, growing up basically overseas, I went to 10 schools before I ever got into high school. So,
wow.
And a lot of that time was spent really not going to school, no formal education. There were times when we were traveling and I would spend weeks, sometimes months at a time without going to school. My parents insisted that I read. They prepared reading lists for me. They gave me books, and I had to read these books, and I became a voracious reader. I enjoyed reading, and I decided one day, and I even remember when it was, I was in the 5th grade. I was 10 years old. The Hungarian Revolution was going on at the time. I was fascinated by that. I was fascinated by stories I was reading about the Hungarian Revolution. So I just sat down. I wrote a short story about a boy caught up in the Hungarian Revolution. And my dad took this story and he had his secretary type it up and he gave it back to me. And I was a published writer, and I thought this is wonderful. I can do this. And that's what, reading and leading this life where I was forced to read because of the lack of a formal education led to my writing career.
Which is amazing. It's an interesting way to have gone about it. Matter of fact, your work has been published in many consumer magazines, popular ones, and respected political journals as well. So your day is very consumed still with writing, right?
Oh yeah, I guess, and this sounds trite, but a writer writes. Writing is as innate to me as breathing. It's just what I do. We now have these various social, networks that we can write on, Facebook and all the rest of it. So I always find myself, no matter where I am, what I'm doing, typing something up in a response to a Facebook, something I read that inspired me or that got me mad that I had to respond to. So yes, I write every single day.
What do you do if you have this? If you get writer's block, if that dreaded writer's block people talk about, whether you're in the middle of a project and then all of a sudden the juices just stop flowing or just getting going doesn't even happen. Because if you're immersed in writing, you're constantly thinking, you're constantly crafting. Do you take moments, whether they're deliberately scheduled or pop up as needed, to pull away from it all and sort of unplug and reboot and then come back at it fresh when you're starting to have a roadblock or just run out of a little steam? Do you pull away from it, leave it on the desk, leave it in the computer, go do something totally unrelated, and then come back with a fresh perspective? What is your approach?
Well, I've been very fortunate. I have never had that problem where writer's block. I just, and it sounds easy perhaps, or it sounds unbelievable, fantastic, but I just sit down and I start writing. I write, maybe I write through writer's block. I don't know if I have a problem, if I have a difficulty with a plot hole or with something that stops my writing process because I don't seem to be able to connect this guy with that guy or this plot line with that plot line. I just keep writing. I just keep writing until I write through it until I figure my way out of it. I don't allow myself to get up and get upset and walk away, because frankly I'm afraid if I get up, if I walk away from a problem, I might not be able, it might catch me so that I can't continue. There have been a couple of novels where I have said, geez, is this working or is this not working? But that's it. I just keep writing through it, and eventually it works itself out. There are times when it gets frustrating, when you reach a point where you're having trouble making things come together, that it gets, it can frustrate you. But I just don't allow myself to get so frustrated that I walk away from it. I just keep writing until I write through it.
You just keep trudging through, right? Keeping the train on the track, which is so incredibly important. This book here that we're talking about, one of the latest, this one here, Mapping the Night, this thriller, it's one that really, again, grabs you and pulls you in, and it sounds like things that happen in life that we all have to deal with. In this case, out this June, of course, from Brick Tower Press, Mapping the Night is following, as you've mentioned, the hunt for a serial killer terrorizing New York's Upper East Side, and attacks carried out only under the cover of dark. So you've got that mystery, bringing the reader into a shadowy underworld where evil lurks everywhere and nothing is as it appears. And the two investigators, FBI secret agent Eileen Prado and New York Police Department commanding officer Nadine Robinson, they soon find that they are up against more than just a sadistic and crafty killer, but an elaborate cover-up that may reach the highest levels of American government. It's pretty cool.
Well, I try and mine my political background to add a little realism to each of my novels. I know enough. I lived politics for 30 years, so I know enough about how the system works, how people think, how they're going to react to things, to be able to do that. In this instance, what happens to Prado, the FBI agent, is she actually gets called into the case. Normally, the FBI will work serial killer cases. But she gets called in specifically to this one because one of the victims of this predator is the daughter of a high-ranking businessman, government official within the government of Suriname, which is a small country in South America that's becoming a more important country because it is oil rich. Long story short, they don't want her identity to be revealed because if the press starts poking around at who this person is, they're going to start poking around at some very sensitive issues between the United States and Suriname. So she gets called in to kind of go ahead and investigate the case, but make sure that the press and even the New York City police do not understand who this woman really is, because she's not operating. She was there under a pseudonym, not her own name. Her family had her go to New York because she was pregnant. They didn't want her having the baby in Suriname. Long story short, they sent her to New York, so she has the child, but she's not operating under her real name. So Prado has to keep that quiet. On the other hand, the New York City police also have a problem in that they know all along the name of the killer, the serial killer, but they don't want to reveal the name because probing into his background too clearly would reveal that the New York police have had a problem with him in the past and they let it ride, and now he is victimizing people around the city. So, there's a mix of a lot of things going on here.
There is, and the New York connection, I know for you, runs deep and runs personal because your mom grew up in Brooklyn. And
Yes.
You spent much of your childhood, as you mentioned, living abroad, which is, I know you mentioned all the 10 different schools and everything, but I think it just adds to the richness of your background and your understanding of culture and people and different opinions and different thoughts and different ways people live, and that all of it matters and all of it's important and all of it's of great value. So you can relate to all kinds of different thoughts and processes and people and the way people come at things, which I think is a beautiful way to live and to have had that exposure. But diehard Brooklyn Dodger fan.
Yes.
My father too. Boy, when Pee Wee Reese and all, and he has gifted me many Brooklyn Dodger cards. And
Oh,
all the things he cut out. He grew up in New York City in Astoria, in Queens, Astoria, just across the East River from Manhattan. And so staunch Brooklyn Dodger fan. And then we grew up out east on Long Island, New York Mets fans, because a lot of the Brooklyn Dodger fans went with the Mets when they were created.
Right.
I don't root for the Dodgers in LA because
No,
they left
you
New
can't do
York.
that.
They left
Yeah.
New York. So, but you have this wonderful affinity for New York, and you even got a chance to meet Dodger icon Jackie Robinson when the
I
team
did.
was barnstorming Japan while your dad was stationed there. I mean, how cool is that? Tell us about that.
Interesting story. The Dodgers, after I think it was their first pennant win in '55, they came over to Japan, and what am I, about 8, 9 years old at the time. And my father, as the press attaché, served as a kind of liaison with the team to all the Japanese press and the sports writers and so on. So he became very friendly with then O'Malley, the owner of the club. And O'Malley invited my family to have what we thought was going to be a breakfast just with him and his wife. And it turned out that they seated us at this long table with all of the Brooklyn Dodgers: Duke Snider, Pee Wee Reese, Roy Campanella, Don Newcomb, Jackie Robinson, and on and on and on. And Gil Hodges, and I could go on forever. Anyway, as a little kid, I am just like in heaven. I mean, I could have died the next day and it would have been, my life would have been fulfilled. And I'm sitting there, and Jackie Robinson is talking to me. And also the next day or sometime during that week, we went to one of the games that they were playing against a Japanese all-star team. And Walter O'Malley asked me to come down to the dugout and sit in the dugout with the players. And again, you're 8, 9 years old. These are your heroes. And it was just almost overwhelming. And I found myself sitting next to Jackie Robinson, who is my hero. That he is my sports hero. I can't think of anybody else who's had a bigger impact on sports and on life, on civil rights and everything else than Jackie Robinson. Anyway, of course, at the time, you're a kid, you're not thinking of all that. You're just thinking this is a baseball guy. And I'm talking to him, and I want to talk baseball. All he wants to talk about with me is my growing up and my time in Japan and what I thought of the Japanese people and one thing and another. So that was my introduction to Jackie Robinson.
That's amazing. That's a great hero to have. I think we need more heroes. The kids need to have people that are great role models, that are doing great things to look up to. My father has always said he's always loved Jackie Robinson. For him as a kid, Joe Louis, because of that fight with Max Schmeling. And Max Schmeling was representing Nazi Germany and the whole thing. And when that whole thing happened, Joe was like a hero. And my father has always said for him as a kid growing up in New York City, that Joe Louis, another, fantastic individual as well. My parents didn't meet Joe Louis, but on their honeymoon in Miami, they did meet Sonny Liston.
Oh, really? That's kind of scary.
That was cool. That was really and he's like, he was 9 feet tall, and there's this really cool picture of him basically with his hand on the top of my mother's head because he was so large. And I think that was at the time when Cassius Clay Muhammad Ali sort of came into the picture and changed his world. But really fascinating stuff, right?
Absolutely. When you meet your heroes, they say you should never meet your heroes because you might be disappointed. In my case, I've had some luck. As I said, I met Jackie Robinson. I actually met Ernest Hemingway in Havana, Cuba. My dad became friendly with a lot of these people because he was the press liaison for a lot of them with the press in whatever country they were in. Hemingway happened to live in Cuba and used to see my dad all the time at a place called Bodeguita del Medio, which is a small restaurant in Old Havana. And we were having my birthday party there at the Bodeguita del Medio, and Hemingway was at the bar, and he walked over. And he said he saw we were having a birthday. He walked over, and of course, I knew who he was. My dad used to read me his short stories all the time, and he wished me a happy birthday. So that was wonderful. And the other thing was also that evening, Errol Flynn, who used to I'm guessing you know who Errol Flynn is. A lot of people my age know who. Obviously, he was a big star back then, but some younger people don't know who he is. But he was, the Robin Hood and Captain Blood and all the rest of it. So he walked over and he also said happy birthday. So it was a wonderful birthday. And I'll never forget. He was leaving the table. Errol Flynn was leaving the table and walking away. And my sister leans over to my dad and she says, boy, Robin Hood sure got fat. Because at the time he was not the svelte Errol Flynn of the Robin Hood movies.
No. I tell you, get like, sort of getting right to the point, right?
Yes, well, that was my sister.
I have to ask this. You've had this Ronald Reagan connection as
Sure.
well, and you wrote the lead article for the publication celebrating the second inauguration of President Ronald Reagan, We the People, an American celebration. What was that experience like? And did you meet President Reagan? Were you involved with, his world in that way where you saw him, knew him, shook his hand?
Yes, I was very fortunate. We have to back up a couple of steps. The senator that I worked for, Paul Laxalt, was the governor of Nevada at the same time that Reagan was the governor of California, and they became friendly personally as well as professionally. They worked on a number of issues that were common to both states. And when Reagan decided to run for president, he called up Senator Laxalt, and asked him if he'd be his campaign manager. And that's the story of how I got involved with that, because I was Laxalt's press secretary and speechwriter. So yes, I was fortunate enough. I met Reagan on a number of occasions, a wonderful, wonderful individual. I mean, aside from all the rest of it, he was just a nice guy. I was never in his presence when he wasn't impressive just as a person. As far as writing the article, that came because they read the speech that I had worked on with Paul Laxalt, with Senator Laxalt, the nominating speech, and they called me up and said if would I be willing to sit down with them and craft this this article for the I think it was the 50th edition or the 50th presidential inauguration, I guess is what it was. Would I write this article for the book? And of course, I said yes. I'd be more than happy to. But a long answer to your short question is yes. I met Reagan. He was a very nice guy.
That's good to hear. Absolutely. It created this wonderful patriotism and pride, and got that Berlin Wall torn down. That's for sure. Mr. Gorbachev,
yes,
tear down that wall.
Well,
your son lives in New York, right?
The politics today and then are so different. I have no. I don't want to talk politics with you, but I just want to say that I have no affinity for what's going on now. I don't understand it.
Yelling and screaming, nobody listening, arguing, just the division, all of it, no matter what side you're on, nobody wants to come to the table. Nobody wants to break bread. It's all about the individual and sort of, how am I going to get ahead in this, as opposed to community and country and all of it together.
Well, the only way representative democracy works is if everybody's working for the common good. And I remember hearing stories all the time from Paul about going to the White House on Friday nights and sitting down with Reagan and Tip O'Neill, who was the Democratic Speaker of the House, and that politics was put aside, and they just sit down and they talk and they get to know each other. I can't envision that happening today.
No, not at all. It's all negative. Yeah, yelling, screaming, negative, and yelling in chambers and yelling, at public events, and just it's nonsense. It's
heartbreaking for those of us who have worked in politics. It is heartbreaking.
And you know what? Kids are seeing this. How the adults are acting and saying, gee, is this how you succeed? Is this what you're supposed to do? Or you're supposed to mow one another over to get what you want? So you have what you want, and you'll step over skeletons in order to get it. I was never raised that way. That's not at all how I think. I like bringing people together, and we have a piece of pie, and we might not all get the biggest slice, but if we at least can all get a slice of it, the earth spins more easily on its axis when things are balanced, and when give and take and listen, and You have your ideas and you have your ideas, and let's see how we can meld them together and create something beautiful for all of us. And the kids are watching, and the kids are, tough being a kid today because they see all of this stuff that's gone on in the last several years, and they're like, what's going on? Is, when I was a kid, I'm sure when you were a kid, it was just different way that things happen. Was everything perfect? Of course not, but just a different way that things happened. And tough stuff. Speaking of kids, your son is in New York, right?
He worked in Manhattan actually for about 20 years. Now he's living out in Hudson Valley, and his 20 years in New York, plus my having come back home when I was traveling with my father as a youngster to New York, to Brooklyn, made me an aficionado, if that's the way to put it, of the city of New York. I was always fascinated with the city of New York. I mean, imagine this kid who's traveling around the world to all kinds of different places, and he has a vision. I mean, he has a picture in his mind of what America looks like. And I come back to New York, every couple of years. So New York became my America, and I became fascinated by the city. So when I had an opportunity to write about the city, which is another character in Mapping the Night, I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted it to represent the city accurately and well. And hopefully I've done that.
So we're all, as I do too, where all the good pizza is and all the good bagels are, huh?
Yeah. Well, I remember my parents taking me to the Stage Door Deli all the time and places like that, and
Carnegie Deli and
all
those.
Yeah. And the one on 2nd Street, I can't remember. Maybe that's the Carnegie Deli. I don't know, but I remember that. And if you go way back to when I was a little kid, the Automats, which were across from Radio City Music Hall.
You put the money in and open and the sandwich would come out.
For a kid, as I said, for a kid from traveling around the world to walking into a place where you can put a money into a slot and it opens up and gives you food, it was just mind blowing.
That's been replaced, I think, now by Shake Shack. Well, I'll have to ask this because, like you said, your mother from Brooklyn. What is in the water in Brooklyn, New York? There's so much talent, so much that comes out of that borough. I mean, so many incredibly talented people, Streisand, Barry Manilow, Neil Diamond, so many incredible people have come out of Brooklyn. We had a guest on the other day and she said, well, because it's tough. You have to make it. You have to prove yourself. You have to have tenacity, patience, resilience. It makes you a richer person. You have to really, Mary Tyler Moore grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Jimmy Fallon is from Brooklyn. It's on and on and on. What do you think it is? The whole country is a beautiful place, but a lot of energy comes out of Brooklyn. What do you think that is from any research you may have done?
Well, I haven't researched that subject in particular, but I'll tell you a story that might help answer that question. When I was a kid coming back to Brooklyn, I would always see, walking around the streets and in the subways, these people with these numbers tattooed to their arms. And I remember one day asking my mom, what is that? Why do so many people have those numbers tattooed to their arms? And then she explained to me about the Holocaust. And a lot of these people, after the Holocaust, those that survived came over to Brooklyn. I think that may be emblematic of the type of person that you find in Brooklyn. You were saying your friend said that it's a tough environment. These are people who had that toughness imbued in them, and they were going to succeed no matter what, and they were going to be kinder, maybe gentler, but also very determined to make their future for themselves and their kids, having seen that some of the dark times, and those that grew up there, they had to do it just to survive.
That's what it's all about. Absolutely. That's what it's all about. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
David. I know it's hot off the presses, right?
It should be out. I think May 20th. I heard from Lori that they were going to
Cool.
have it on, a pre-publication sale on Amazon. It's going to be available for pre-publication purchase, and then June 1st, the novel is actually going to be available to people. So yeah, it's right around the corner. I'm looking forward to it.
That is fantastic. Now, a lot of times, people, there'll be a book, a novel out, but they're already on the next one. Are you already writing the next one?
Yes.
Yeah, I knew it.
Yeah, I've got it's actually a sequel to some of the characters in Mapping the Night. So to answer your question, yes, I've got some ideas in mind, and I've been sketching out some things at the typewriter to work on.
That's fantastic. That is
typewriter.
great.
That tells you how old I am.
Whiteout.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah.
I tell you, this was fantastic. A great conversation, my friend.
Well,
And
thank you.
congratulations on. We just showed, a few of the many books that you have that are out there and available. There is his website as well. Peruse that. It's really fantastic and engaging. And again, look for this one, Amazon and more, where books are sold. Mapping the Night, a thriller. John David Bethel, our very special guest here on the Jim Masters Show. This was a real pleasure. Come by and see us again, with your next one, or anytime you just want to chat. And I hope you enjoyed the time with me as much as I have with you, David.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate very much your spending the time with me.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. And if we dig deep enough, we probably have some cousins in the New York area. I don't doubt it. We're all brothers and sisters, right?
Absolutely.
And fascinating, aside from being an author, just this fascinating background with your dad and you, and the incredible resume that you have is honorable, and we thank you for it. Thank you for everything you've done for the good of all of us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. And the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as they say, which is evident right here. You be well. Come see us again. And thanks so much for joining us, David.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. And congratulations on the book.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. John David Bethel here on the Jim Masters Show. What a great conversation, right? And again, if you want to check out this book or any of the others, go to Amazon. And of course, you can go to his website as well, which is johndavidbethel.com. Cool stuff, right? What a great conversation. Gang, if you did enjoy this episode and all the episodes that you enjoy of the Jim Masters Show, Entertainment, Lifestyle, Celebrity Talk Show series, we encourage you to do something extra special, and that is like. Click the like, thumbs up button on our YouTube channel. That's where we house hundreds and hundreds of episodes of our series. Click the like, thumbs up, interact with us, leave a comment on the YouTube channel under the episode, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. That's where all the episodes are. And of course, you can share this episode on your social media. And all of you who have done that, who have been liking, subscribing, sharing, it does take a village. We thank you. Everybody watching all around the world, it does take a village, and we really appreciate your support of what we're doing here at the Jim Masters Show live series. For all of us here, I am your host, Jim Masters, thanking you for your time. This time till next time, love one another, take care of one another, and don't forget to do the very same for yourself. We thank John David Bethel for being here, and we thank all of you. Hope you enjoyed the show. Let us know. Leave a comment for us. Like, comment, subscribe. Come see us again here in Liberty Hall, the Jim Masters Show. We appreciate you being with us. It means the world to us. Take care and be well, and see us again right here on the Jim Masters Show. Cheers.